For over a soul-crushing decade, Ed O'Neill was trapped, living as the man America absolutely loved to despise. To the entire world, he wasn't Ed. He was the iconic Al Bundy. He was the utterly defeated shoe salesman, a man imprisoned in a house echoing with insults and shattered dreams. But what was hiding behind that legendary, cynical smirk was one of Hollywood's biggest secrets. It was a story almost no fan could have ever imagined, a heart-wrenching tale of pure exhaustion, gnawing regret, and terrifying moments, where the line between the Al Bundy character and the real man completely vanished. Believe me, when those cameras stopped rolling, Ed O'Neill was anything but laughing. He was helplessly watching his own life become a twisted reflection of the punchline America pointed and laughed at every single Sunday night. And now, after all these years, he's finally revealing the Ed O'Neill truth, the raw, unfiltered story that the tabloids somehow missed, and the one that would forever change how he saw himself and his entire world. It all started with the audition that would alter his life back in 1986. A then unknown Ed O'Neill stepped into a sterile casting room in Los Angeles, completely unaware that this moment would define the rest of his existence. And get this, he wasn't even the studio's first choice. He wasn't even close. The bigwigs at Fox were desperate for a household name for their risky new Fox sitcom, a show about a spectacularly miserable family. But then, in a move that would become legendary, Ed just slumped into a chair, let out this long, soul-crushing sigh, and mumbled his first line. The entire room went dead silent. That one tiny gesture, a move he'd copied from watching his own exhausted uncles after grueling factory shifts in Ohio, was the lightning-in-a-bottle moment the creators, Michael Moy and Ron Levitt, saw Al Bundy literally materialize before their very eyes. But even after that incredible display, the network was still terrified. You have to remember, Ed O'Neill wasn't a star. He was a struggling theater actor with a couple of minor film credits and a face nobody recognized. Weeks dragged on with absolutely no word. He was convinced he'd lost the part for good, but behind the scenes, the producers were fighting tooth and nail for him. They were screaming from the rooftops that his bone-deep weariness, his perfect comedic timing, and his raw authenticity were absolutely irreplaceable. When Fox finally, reluctantly, said yes, the pressure was crushing and immediate. Ed O'Neill wasn't just playing a character. He was carrying the entire future of a fledgling network, desperate to prove itself against titans like NBC and CBS. If the controversial 1,980-second sitcom Married with Children failed, it wouldn't just be the end of his career, it could have sunk Fox's grand ambitions before they even started. So Ed threw every ounce of his being into the role. He obsessed over every single line of the script, pouring his soul into making every sigh, every brutal insult, and every sarcastic comeback feel painfully real. But what he couldn't have known then was that this intense realism would come at a devastating price. The crushing exhaustion of playing a man who had completely given up on life started to bleed into his own reality. And before he knew it, the family that was supposed to be nothing more than television fiction began to implode from a devastating TV show controversy behind the scenes. It started with a shocking recast and the crushing burden of believability. Most fans would be shocked to learn that the Bundy family we saw in the pilot wasn't the original cast. They absolutely weren't. When Married with Children first filmed its pilot, Kelly and Bud Bundy were actually played by two entirely different actors, Tina Caspary and Hunter Carson. And from the very first day, the energy on set felt completely wrong. In a later Ed O'Neill interview, he recalled that something about the family dynamic was just broken. The chemistry was non-existent, and the jokes were falling disastrously flat. He could feel the dead air in the room, every punchline landing with a painful thud, every silence hanging heavier than a tomb. Then, just a few short weeks after they wrapped the pilot, the executives at Fox made an absolutely brutal call. Both kids were unceremoniously fired. And the reason, according to Ed O'Neill himself, wasn't just about their performance, it was about their compatibility with Time's him asterisk. The entire show's survival depended on the illusion that this was a real dysfunctional family, and the studio was convinced that the energy surrounding their star, Ed O'Neill, had to feel 100% authentic. Tina was just too polished, Hunter far too restrained. It was a gut-wrenching decision that set the stage for one of Hollywood's biggest secrets. Ed O'Neill later confessed to a crushing guilt over what happened. Just imagine those actors had filmed the pilot, celebrated their big break, and told their families they'd finally made it, only to receive a single, devastating phone call that erased it all. They were gone before the show even began, he admitted. Then, the replacements came marching in. A 15-year-old force of nature named Christina Applegate walked into that room and absolutely nailed the role on the spot. She was unbelievably sharp. She was hilarious, and she possessed that bizarre, perfect cocktail of innocence and rebellion the creators were absolutely desperate for. Then came David Faustino, at just 12 years old. Gave Bud Bundy this absolutely brilliant, almost tragic humor that miraculously counteracted the sheer gloom of the Al Bundy character. Suddenly, the entire behind-the-scenes dynamic of this legendary Fox sitcom just exploded into perfection. But while the on-screen family finally clicked, the behind-the-scenes pressures were building into a storm. The show was filmed in front of a live studio audience. Every single episode became a public test. Each roar of laughter, or worse, the lack of it, was a harsh judgment, and as Ed O'Neill would soon learn, carrying the emotional weight of Al Bundy's humor and heartbreak every week would demand more than just good timing. It would take a devastating toll on his mind, his body, and his relationships for years to come. This was the stage that never slept, and here's one of the great Hollywood secrets: the hidden toll of the live audience. Every single week for 11 agonizing years, Ed O'Neill stood under the blistering heat of studio lights, performing for a live audience of 300 to 500 people. The laughter was terrifyingly real, but so were the stumbles, the deafening silences, and the suffocating pressure. Married with Children wasn't filmed in some safe bubble with a convenient laugh track. No, every single scene lived or died in real time, and Ed felt that crushing weight more than anyone else. He once confessed that when a scene bombed, you could physically feel a cold wave of disappointment wash over the room. But when the audience finally laughed, it was pure electricity, he said. But when they didn't, you just wanted the floor to open up and swallow you whole. The exhaustion was absolutely relentless. Some episodes stretched deep into the dead of night as the cast repeated takes, desperately chasing that perfect, elusive rhythm between the roar of laughter and the void of silence. If the crowd laughed too long, the comedic timing completely collapsed. If they didn't laugh at all, the directors would stop everything for a painful reshoot. Ed's body began to pay the price for the hit 1,980 Seconds sitcom. He was doing constant, brutal, physical comedy, a chaotic ballet of falls, fights, and slapstick mayhem, all meant to look completely effortless. But by a grueling season 5, his back was in constant, agonizing pain. He pushed through the bruises and the bone-deep fatigue, knowing that if the Al Bundy character ever looked like he wasn't giving it his all, the entire illusion would shatter into a million pieces. He later said that some days he'd drive home, barely able to move, his body screaming in protest, only to drag himself back the very next morning and do it all over again. That live crowd also created excruciating moments when jokes about Peg's laziness or her desires went a step too far. You could feel the discomfort ripple through the audience. The amazing Katie Sagal once told him she absolutely dreaded certain scenes. It wasn't because of the script, but because performing them in front of hundreds of real people felt like being emotionally stripped bare. Still, Ed insisted the audience was the lifeblood that made the show feel so dangerously alive. It was unpredictable, messy, and brutally honest. But that same raw energy was a double-edged sword, ruthlessly exposing every weakness, every missed beat, every piece of humanity the cast tried to hide. And it was during these long, sleepless weeks that the first dangerous cracks began to appear, not just in the Bundy household, but between the very real people who brought it to life. We're talking feuds, regrets, and the shocking fallout with Amanda Bearse. For years, fans of Married with Children speculated about the simmering tension between Ed O'Neill and Amanda Bearse, the actress who played Marcy, the sarcastic neighbor, constantly clashing with Al Bundy. Ed denied the rumors for what felt like an eternity, but in a recent, shocking Ed O'Neill interview, he finally admitted the Ed O'Neill truth. A TV show controversy was brewing. There was a nasty feud, and it lasted for years. It all began back in 1989 with something that seemed so harmless, a TV guide cover featuring the stars of the hit Fox sitcom. But in a shocking twist, only Ed O'Neill and Katie Sagal made the cover, leaving Amanda Bearse and her on-screen husband David Garrison completely erased from the picture. The heartbreaking Ed O'Neill truth is that he knew about the cover beforehand but said absolutely nothing. He just saw it as business, one of those cold Hollywood secrets. He was the lead, Katie was his co-star, and that's just how the machine worked. But for Amanda, it was a soul-crushing betrayal. She felt utterly invisible, wiped from the legacy of a show she had poured her heart into defining. He could have said something, she would later reveal to heartbroken fans. He didn't. In a stunning Ed O'Neill interview years later, he finally admitted he regretted that deafening silence. "I absolutely should have spoken up," he confessed. "That was a terrible mistake." But by the time that realization finally hit him, the catastrophic damage was already done. The poison had seeped in. The entire atmosphere behind the scenes changed overnight. Conversations became clipped and cold, eye contact vanished, and the once perfect professional rhythm that made the Al Bundy character's dynamic so hilarious was now suffocated by an invisible, crushing tension. Things took an even darker turn in 1993. That was the year Amanda Bearse got married, and pointedly did not invite Ed O'Neill. She later insisted it wasn't out of spite, claiming she just desperately wanted one peaceful day. A day free from the agonizing awkwardness of their shattered friendship, but Ed O'Neill took it as a direct blow to the heart. "That hurt," he confessed, "the pain still raw. I thought we were family." From that moment forward, they barely uttered a word to each other that wasn't in a script. Even their scenes together became excruciatingly uncomfortable. It was a twisted, tragic irony for two actors who had built their careers making millions of people laugh with their characters' relentless on-screen bickering. The amazing Katie Sagal apparently tried to play peacemaker, but both sides were completely dug in, refusing to yield an inch. Years later, Ed O'Neill admitted his own ego was a huge part of the problem. "I should have understood how she felt," he lamented. "I just didn't." That devastating silence between them became a ghost that haunted the set. A ghost that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling, and as the seasons dragged on, the set of Married with Children felt less like a comedy, and more like an emotional battlefield, where every single joke was hiding a deep, unspoken wound. But this was just one part of the brewing TV show controversy. Then came the day everything exploded. In 1989, Married with Children, that iconic 1,980-second sitcom, walked straight into a firestorm. A firestorm so massive it could have completely annihilated any other show, and it very nearly did. And it all started with just one woman. Her name was Terry Rakolta, a conservative activist from Michigan, who was so offended by an episode she saw that she declared all-out war on the Fox sitcom. She launched a massive letter-writing campaign, blasting advertisers with claims that the show was corrupting the very soul of American families. Within weeks, corporate giants, including Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble, buckled under the pressure and yanked their ads from Fox, which was still a fledgling, vulnerable network at the time. It was an absolute nightmare. Executives scrambled, holding frantic emergency meetings, desperately debating whether to water down the scripts or just cancel the show outright. Inside the studio, sheer panic erupted. Writers whispered in fear about censorship. Crew members were terrified they were about to lose their jobs. And the cast, who always knew the show was a sharp satire, were suddenly being publicly crucified for supposedly promoting the very dysfunction they were mocking. Ed O'Neill, who would later become a household name again as Modern Family Ed O'Neill, remembered the utter chaos of that time vividly. He said he first heard about the boycott from reporters on set. "Not from the network. They told us to keep our mouths shut," he explained. "They were terrified that if we defended the show, it would only add fuel to the fire." The incredible Katie Sagal later called that period absolutely terrifying, genuinely fearing her career would be over before it even truly began. The brilliant Christina Applegate, who was only 17 years old at the time, became a lightning rod for the moral outrage. Critics mercilessly accused the show of exploiting her character's image, completely ignoring the fact she was a teenager just performing a script written by adults. The hypocrisy was staggering. But what few fans realized was how that controversy changed the show forever. The writers didn't soften the humor, they sharpened it like a weapon. They became masters of slipping outrageously subversive jokes right under the censors' noses, using clever innuendo and brilliant wordplay instead of just blunt shock value. But in a shocking twist of fate, the boycott backfired spectacularly, becoming the greatest publicity stunt Fox could have ever dreamed of. The ratings absolutely exploded, as people who'd never even heard of Married with Children rushed to their TVs just to see what all the fuss was about. The Ed O'Neill truth is that he later joked it was the greatest marketing campaign we never paid for. But beneath that sarcastic humor, a bitter reality was setting in. This whole TV show controversy was a brutal lesson. In Hollywood, every victory comes with a price tag, and that price was often paid in innocence, devastating loss, and deep regret, leading to the one scene he absolutely refused to film. By 1991, the infamous Fox sitcom had weathered the storm of controversy and had built a massive cult following. But some of the darkest Hollywood secrets were about to unfold, because behind all the on-screen laughter, a real-life tragedy was about to strike the set during the show's 6th season. The incredible Katie Sagal, who brilliantly played the sharp-tongued Peg Bundy, was expecting a child, and the writers, in a moment of inspiration, decided to write her real-life pregnancy right into the show's plot. It was a bombshell. The Bundys were finally having another baby. It felt like the perfect, heartwarming next chapter for the series. And then, in her 7th month, everything shattered. Tragically, Katie lost the baby. The entire production ground to a halt. Scripts were literally torn to shreds as the writers scrambled to rewrite the entire storyline overnight, morphing it into a bizarre, surreal dream sequence. In it, the Al Bundy character imagines Peg giving birth, only to have him wake up in a cold sweat and realize it was all a heartbreaking nightmare. For the audience at home, it was just another piece of dark Bundy humor, but for the cast, it was almost unbearable. The truth from Ed O'Neill himself was that the pain was palpable. He confessed he had absolutely no idea how to handle the situation. "I didn't know what to say," he admitted in a later Ed O'Neill interview, revealing a deeply vulnerable side. He figured staying silent was safer than saying the wrong thing, but he was wrong. Silence wasn't what she needed. In an unbelievable show of strength, Katie Sagal returned to the set not long after, While still drowning in grief, she had to force herself back into Peg's sassy, teasing persona while everyone on set tiptoed around the elephant in the room. This became one of Ed O'Neill's deepest regrets. He felt he had failed her, not being the friend she desperately needed in that dark moment. And right around that same gut-wrenching time, another crisis erupted behind the scenes, pushing Ed O'Neill to his absolute breaking point. The writers pitched a scene that he felt made Al Bundy genuinely cruel, crossing a moral line that Ed simply would not allow. He argued that Al could be a miserable, angry loser, even pathetic, but never truly evil. If you make him mean, he passionately argued, the audience will stop laughing with him and start hating him. After a fiery, heated battle, the writers finally caved and rewrote the entire scene. It was one of those incredibly rare moments where Ed O'Neill threw his weight around to protect the soul of the character, proving that deep down, beneath all the insults, the iconic Al Bundy still had a sliver of humanity. These two bombshells, the devastating loss and his defiant stand, completely changed how Ed saw the show. The man known for playing a cynical shoe salesman was suddenly faced with the crushing reality of how fragile everyone behind the scenes truly was. And from that moment forward, the laughter on that famous set never, ever felt quite the same. Then came the brutal ending that absolutely no one saw coming. After 11 incredible seasons, Married with Children, that legendary 1,980-second sitcom had cemented its legacy as one of TV's most controversial shows. But in 1997, without a single warning, it all came crashing down. It was just over. No final episode, no phone call from the network, just cold, deafening silence. And the way Ed O'Neill found out is one of the most painfully awkward Hollywood secrets ever told. Picture this. He was back in his home state of Ohio, staying at some quiet little bed and breakfast, finally enjoying a rare moment of peace away from the Hollywood chaos. Suddenly, a car pulls up outside, a couple of newlyweds still in their wedding gear, with cans rattling behind them and a just married sign. The groom spots him and loses his mind, screaming, "Oh my God, it's Al Bundy in Ohio." Ed, ever the good sport, just smiles and congratulates them, thinking it's just another fan encounter. But then the bride says something that stops his heart cold. "We're so sorry about your show." Ed is completely baffled. "What do you mean?" he asks. The groom looks at him, absolutely stunned. "You don't know? It's all over the radio. You guys got canceled." And just like that, that's how he found out. Not from a Fox executive, not from his own producers, but from two complete strangers on their wedding day. He later recounted this unbelievable story to his on-screen daughter, the amazing Christina Applegate, and she just burst out laughing in pure disbelief. Because, can you believe it? She found out the exact same way. It was passed down secondhand. A guy who knew a guy told my assistant. She said they never even bothered to call us after a full 10 years of carrying that Fox sitcom, their most talked-about show. The cast was just brutally discarded without so much as a simple goodbye. No wrap party, no final script, absolutely nothing. Ed O'Neill admitted he was furious at first, but then that rage just melted into a cold, hollow feeling. "That's Hollywood," he said quietly, revealing one of its darkest secrets. "You give them your absolute best years, and then one day, you just don't exist." The amazing Christina Applegate would later say that despite all the TV show controversy, she was immensely proud of what they built. But for Ed, the ending cut so much deeper. It was a crushing reminder that the world roared with laughter at the Al Bundy character, but not one person stayed behind to say goodbye to the man himself. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. In the end, just like Al Bundy, he walked away completely alone, quietly, without a single round of applause. Years later, the great Ed O'Neill would find his redemption. The Modern Family Ed O'Neill era gave him a glorious second act, a chance to play Jay Pritchett, a man who finally loved his family instead of just fighting them. It was everything the legendary Al Bundy wasn't. He was warm, grounded, and even hopeful. But it also made Ed look back at Married with Children with a profoundly different kind of understanding. He realized that Al Bundy wasn't just some cheap joke. He was a raw reflection of pure frustration, broken dreams, and that quiet, grinding endurance. Millions of people saw a painful piece of themselves in him, even if they would never admit it. If you watched that classic 1,980-second sitcom and thought Al was someone to admire, an Ed O'Neill interview once revealed, you completely missed the point. He was there so we could all laugh at how brutally hard life can be. So what about you? Do you think Married with Children could possibly survive in today's world, or was it a product of its time, a moment in history that should never be repeated? Let us know the Ed O'Neill truth you believe in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got more behind-the-scenes stories